have made it to the end. This presentation tonight will be recorded and posted to YouTube. So if you do not want your face shown, you are welcome to turn off your camera, because it will at some point capture, a speaker or audience interaction. The webinar committee does meet next week, and we would love to hear from you if you would like to tell us any topics, questions, or speakers that you would like to see at a PICUP webinar in 2022. And yes, self-nomination is encouraged. So I've put in the chat a link to a Google Doc that you can put whatever your heart desires that you would like to see at a PICUP webinar, maybe a type of activity you're interested in, maybe a challenge in integrating computation, maybe a speaker you'd like to hear from, or something you'd like to offer. Feel free to type it up in there. I will take that to the webinar committee when we meet next week. I checked with Nick on Slack, and we don't think there's any other PICUP business that we need to announce. I have not heard from any other PICUP higher up, so I think we are good to introduce our speaker. Oh, and Brittany's already recording. Wonderful. So we're going to hear from Todd Zimmerman. He is he's a professor at University of Wisconsin-Stout, and he is our illustrious editor-in-chief of the PICUP Collection of Resources, which is, he's going to tell you more, but the PICUP Collection is kind of the central thing that we have, that people come to the website and make use of, these materials that you can just drop into your classes. And that number is steadily growing of resources there. And he's going to talk to us about some of the highlights from the PICUP Collection. So Todd, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for being here. I know that it's the time of semester where we start to go a little crazy and pull our hair out and everything, and just want the semester to be over. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I do want to talk about the exercise sets, but I want to point out a couple of other features on the website that may not be quite as well known. Obviously, the events tab is a listing where things are. What I just recently found out was to find more details about all the previous webinars. I had in the past just been going to this list right here. I hadn't realized that if you go to the community tab and then watch even more recordings here, it will actually give you a little bit more detail about what is in each of the webinars. So that's just a really nice resource if you want to find something on a specific topic. The other thing I wanted to point out is the resources tab. A lot of people don't know that this is here, and we're slowly building this. Michelle Kuchera and I are the editors for this tab, and I want to say that we are always looking for more posts here. This is a place for you to share what sort of things you've done in your classrooms, things that have worked, things that didn't work, things you think other people might be interested in hearing about. If you are at all interested in writing something, feel free to reach out to me or Michelle Kuchera on Slack, and we're happy to have stuff up here. We'd like to get more material. I know that when I first started out trying to incorporate computation, there wasn't a lot of information available there, and so I kind of had to make a lot of it up on my own. And in fact, one of the first things I did was I started teaching my students how to program in my physics course, and it was horrible. It didn't work. I know I'm not a computer science instructor. The class wasn't meant to be programming, but I didn't know what it should look like. I didn't have any easy examples. And so this is a really good place for us to share things that we've done, whether successful or not. So other people know what's out there. And so we have several different practices here, and so this is a good place to go if you're looking for something. But again, I really hope that some of you will be happy to share some of these activities. The Faculty Commons also is another place that people, I don't think, take as much advantage of. This is a nice place to kind of, the way I look at it, it's kind of a place to dump curriculum material that you don't think quite fits into the exercise set category, because with the exercise sets, they're a fairly rigid format of what we're expecting. But if you have other things that maybe they're not a full exercise set, or maybe you just want to even share your syllabus or other activities, the Faculty Commons is a really good place to go ahead and put that material up. And so hopefully we can get some more people sharing things that you've done. It does not have to be fully formed. All right, it doesn't have to be peer review ready or anything like that. So hopefully we can see a lot more material here. We got quite a few things in different topics as well. So that kind of brings us to the exercise sets, which is what I want to focus on. Just kind of pulling out a few hidden gems, things that I've seen come across my desk over the year that I thought were worth highlighting. One other feature, you think I know my way around this website. One other feature I very recently learned was that you can sort these things by publication date, because I was complaining to Kelly Roos and Larry Engelhardt that it would be really nice if there was some way for us to see what the newest activities were on the website, rather than having to go through everything. And they just kind of pointed out to me, if you go here and sort by publication date, then you can go ahead and you can see what the most recent published activities are. So that's a very, very handy little tool. But what I want to focus on is this. I put together a Trinket site that has some of the activities that I wanted to highlight. You're welcome to go into this after today. I'm going to make this private because it has solutions, but if you want access to it after we're done today, just send me a message in Slack and I'm happy to add you to the course as an instructor, so you have access to this material. It's taken straight from the exercise sets, but I just kind of like having everything here in place. So one of the first ones I wanted to focus was from Deva O'Neill. She's done several really nice activities. This is the first one I wanted to highlight. And this one allows you to go ahead and plot centers of mass and kind of help give students a little bit more visual feel for the calculations that we do. And this is was kind of a nice activity to have during the pandemic when we couldn't really be doing labs. Because usually we do some sort of balancing meter stick type lab and deal with things that way. And this is kind of a way to get at some of the same concepts of center of mass. But one of the things that I really liked was this particular activity here. Let me full screen here. This out of the way. There we go. So if I go ahead and I click, I can add in masses here. And with each click, it will go ahead then and plot where the center of mass is as we go ahead and add in more and more masses. And so this is kind of a nice way to give just a visual display of how these things go. It's a fairly simple activity. But the other thing I like is that it shows some of the interactivity that you can have in some of these coding, especially if you're running something like VPython in the GlowScript browser. I guess now we're calling it WebPython, I think is what Bruce had said, to try to avoid some of the confusion. But I like this. It's fairly simple, but it shows some of that interactivity. The other thing that I like is I didn't really know how to go about extracting data from the screen to make things more interactive. And a lot of times I'll just kind of go through the exercise sets and see if someone's done something along these lines. And now I kind of use this as a template for some of the other more some of the activities that I want to do in my class, where I want students actually clicking on the screen and getting data from that and things like that. All right. So the next one I wanted to look at was Purple Pandas. This is one of Brandon Lunk's activities. He's done a couple on StatMech.
So I wanted to, but in somebody brought up adding moment of inertia. Is there a way to do that with the center of mass exercise set?
I'm sure there is. If we just go in and take a look at the code, I can't quite get the code up anymore. But I think it can be very easy to go ahead and add that in. Let's see the calculations here. Let me go back to full screen so it's easier for everyone to see. Just looking at the calculations over here, I don't see why you couldn't go ahead and specify some reference point and then go ahead and just add in the calculations and print that out. I think that would be a pretty easy thing to do. Yeah, and I think a lot of times the exercise sets can serve as really good inspiration. Frequently, people won't actually take the exercise sets wholesale and just use them in their classrooms. A lot of times what I've seen is people will take them and kind of use that as a jumping off point to do some more interesting things. And if you do that, hopefully you will share that material back with the wider community. I've seen a lot of interesting things come out of other activities. Any other questions at the moment? All right. So Brandon Lunk has done a couple of StatMech activities, and I just kind of like this one because it's a fairly simple activity that's showing this idea of microstates versus macrostates. And the other thing that's kind of nice about it is that it's not just a Python activity. Let me how do I get rid of this window? There we go. There is a spreadsheet implementation as well, where you can look at these microstates and macrostates. And given that we have things like Google Sheets or whatnot, it's very easy for students to collaborate online with these activities. And so here, for example, is what that spreadsheet looks like. And if we go ahead and there we go. We can go ahead and we've got a nice little control panel over here. We can change the number of games, the wins and losses. And then over on this side, we see what the statistical distribution is looking like. And you can see that as you have more and more games, you do sure enough get that nice bell curve that you would expect. Let's go ahead and anyway, it's very easy to play around with this. Why is it shifting the, I'm not sure why it's shifting the curve over. Anyway, there's a link in the Trinket page if you want to go ahead and play around with that. And although I am a big proponent of Python, and I will talk up the benefits of Python until I'm blue in the face, we're open to any other sorts of tools. Basically, it's whatever tool makes the most sense for you. And in a lot of places, spreadsheets make a lot of sense. And a lot of people don't even think of that as being computation, but it is. And in fact, it's a very concrete way to get at thinking about loops and iterations on calculations. I know that a lot of times when students see like a for loop or a while loop, they don't fully understand what's going on. It seems just a little bit magical to them. But when you come to the case of a spreadsheet and then you go ahead and you type in your calculations and then you click, drag down on all of those cells and you just copy them and you can see what's going on, it makes it a little bit clearer. He has a couple of other StatMech activities that I do encourage you to take a look at. And I think they do have Python implementations as well, but I just wanted to highlight that not everything here has to be all about Python. All right, so the next one that I wanted to look at is this. This is an example of how you can combine labs and computational modeling. And I really, really like this one. In fact, let me pull this one up real quick. Here it is. And so what they're doing is they're using the accelerometer in a cell phone to measure acceleration for a couple of different things. The going down a slide, going in an elevator, when the elevator starts up, moving at constant velocity and slowing down. And it really combines together a nice way of analyzing the data and drawing some conclusions from it and using the computer as a tool to make that connection. And now the one thing I'll point out just right off the bat is that running Trinket, the GlowScript Trinket is free. If you want to make use of Python 3 on the Trinket website, the instructor does need to have a paid account. It's something like $10 a month or whatever, but only the instructor needs to have access to it. So here we have a data set that actually came with the activity, and we can go ahead and run this and take a look. And it's showing what the raw output, oops, let's go full screen here, showing the raw output from the accelerometers along each of the 3 different directions. And so the first part of the activity is just kind of showing the students how to get this information into Trinket and how to plot it, and how to extract some statistics from it. And then this I really kind of like. So what they, get rid of this. What they have you do is, using the acceleration data, see if what the position of the object is. So just starting off and actually integrating the raw data to get a function, a graph of the position versus time based solely on the acceleration data. It's starting up, I think. Let's try it again. There we go. So here you can see what that acceleration data is, and then with a little bit of smoothing of the data, and then just a simple Euler integration, basically just taking the acceleration times the time step and adding all of those terms up. You get this nice little velocity versus time graph. And then when you do the numerical integration on this one, you go ahead and you end up with the position versus time graph. And you can see, I think this must be a round trip. Yep, it goes from floor 0 to floor 1 and back down again. And so you can kind of see it in here. You know, start off at height 0, you don't end up quite at that same height at the end. And that really opens up the discussion to what the issue is here. Why aren't you getting the same results? Because too often students will take the data as gospel and just treat it as if this is the truth. And so it's really kind of nice when you have messy data. And this, I think, is a simple enough problem for students to understand that it gives them some freedom to kind of grapple with the readings. And one of the things they have you look at is the idea of calibration of your sensors. And so that's another thing that you can bring into the conversation here. And then I think I must have only done part of the activity because there's more to it. I think there was another couple of activities. That at least gives you an idea of some of the things that you can do there. So moving on, we now have 3D printed files available on the website. This is something that Deva O'Neill and some of her students had suggested that we add. And honestly, when it comes down to it, PICUP's all about using computers to do physics. And so 3D printing seemed like a natural extension. And so this one is printing off the parts for a water wheel and investigating the torque associated with that. So there's no computer modeling on this, although easily you could add something in. Mostly it's just about providing the files for the equipment. And this is this can be a low-cost way to put together experiments if you've got easy access to a 3D printer. So there's a couple of activities up there by Deva, but we hope more people will share some of their 3D printed activities with us going forward. All right, so here's another thing by Deva O'Neill, one of her students. And part of the reason I'm just highlighting them is because she's put together some really good activities that I think are interesting. And it really highlights some of the things you can do with computers beyond the standard activities that we're used to. Really the whole exciting aspect of putting the computers into the classroom, doing the modeling, is that we can deal with problems that aren't your end of the chapter traditional situation, and you come up with something that's a lot more meaningful.
Todd, going back really quick to the 3D printing activity, is that in the faculty commons?
It should be in the exercise sets.
Okay.
Let me just double check.
And we do have the link to Todd's compilation here in the chat.
Yep.
Okay, Anthony found it. Great.
Okay. So this one was dealing with gravitational waves, and I remember when this came across my desk, it's right around when LIGO started spitting out some data, and it was very timely because my background is in atomic physics, and so I love anything with lasers and interferometry, and the fact that LIGO is able to measure these waves using essentially a Michelson interferometer with a Fabry-Perot cavity slapped onto it was just kind of caught my interest. And so what she's looking at here is trying to develop some intuition about what's going on in these scenarios. And she kind of builds it up very nicely with dealing with, for example, what does it mean when we talk about things like divergence? And so I think this first activity has basically come up with some sort of field that would have a positive divergence to it, whether or not it's actually a physical field or not. And the student can go ahead and see that. And again, it's kind of taking the mathematics and putting it into a visual format that's a little bit easier to understand. And then talking about this notion of polarization in a wave, and plotting some of these fields of what these things look like. This was the part that I really liked. So now she has some test masses. Can I move this bar? Okay, good. So let's go ahead and zoom this in a little bit. And so then if you go ahead and you show what happens if you have a gravitational wave moving, what effect does that have on the test masses? And this one, trying to remember which type of gravitational wave it was. not seeing that information. But again, it's allowing you to play around with things that you might not normally get to do in a classroom without a lot more theoretical background. And you can then kind of play around with some of the different parameters and see what sort of effect changing that would have on these. So for example, let's try changing the frequency to something higher. Let's go to 100. What's happening? It's just very slow. Yep, okay. Sorry about this. I think my computer is starting to complain at me a little bit. Anyway, hopefully you can kind of spend a little bit of time playing around with this activity and seeing what she's put together here. And then we get into talking about some of the different motions that you can see in these masses and breaking it down. And you can see that what each of these little masses is doing is just orbiting around a certain set position. And then this last activity is kind of putting everything together and showing what happens when you've got taking all of the previous effects into account and looking at the system as a whole. And I don't know. I don't know that I don't teach astrophysics, and so I don't know when I would actually use this kind of activity. But it definitely gives me a lot of ideas of some of the things that that I could probably do in other classes. And so I think using these exercise sets as a way of inspiring you, I think is a very good, very worthy goal. All right. So one last activity I wanted to highlight was Brian's activity on X-ray diffraction. And a lot of our activities tend to focus on the introductory classical mechanics and introductory E&M. And so having a looking at some of the material in the upper level course, I think is a really kind of nice. And I like that this sort of activity really kind of cuts across multiple classes. My original thought was using this in a condensed matter in a solid state physics class, but I can definitely see how it has applications to wave optics, to a modern physics. And so it's really kind of nice to see some of these activities that are taking advantage of multiple different contexts when you could see them. And so here, if we go ahead and change some of the lattice parameters, you can then get the diffraction pattern over here. And so it's kind of fun to play around with the different parameters and see what effect changing some of these conditions can have on this. And I know when I teach diffraction concepts, helping students get a good intuition for what you're actually even talking about, I think is very challenging when you're just looking at analytical solutions. And so being able to go in here and change one of these numbers and seeing what the effect is can also be very helpful. Another thing that I really kind of enjoy, and not necessarily with just this activity, but with any of the activities I have my students do, is the act of getting them to translate from a mathematical description to a computer model and then draw some conclusions from the results of that model. I think it gives them a deeper understanding of the material, better than they get from just staring at analytical equations and learning how to solve the various easy cases. And so I think that's a valuable use for this. And
I know that I'm trying to attach model to actual real data that they collect so they can really see that effect and see the relationship. That's something I've been exploring.
Yes, yeah, and one of the things we would like to see more of in the either faculty commons or exercise sets are activities that are making use of data and things like that. So if you guys have things, please feel free to share them. Anyway, those were the things that I wanted to highlight. There's plenty of other really good activities in the exercise set. These are just some that I felt deserved a little bit more love and just kind of caught my interest. These are the kind of ones that I like to go in and on my own time, I like to play around with them and see what sort of weird things I can cause to happen. And it's also kind of fun to try to break the models and see if you can come up with scenarios where things just don't line up or don't work very well. The link, I think, for this is in the chat. I think I will probably, right now it's currently open to the public. I will probably make it private sometime tomorrow. So if you still want access, please just send me a message in Slack and I'm happy to add you as an instructor of this course. You can have access to it later on if you want to play around. But again, this is all came straight from the exercise sets themselves. It's just kind of handy to have this this playground.
Hey, Todd, can you quickly, so I'm not on is it the PICUP Slack channel or something like that? I'm not on that channel. How would we send you a message there if we're not already on the channel?
I've included in the chat the link you can use to sign up for the PICUP Slack. People are posting there every week. It's a great place to get questions answered or to reach out to folks.
Well, I went and looked at that briefly. What I see is is an online form to send a message, but is that going to allow me to actually be added to the channel?
Yes, we'll have to add your email address. Maybe I see Nick is unmuting. Maybe Nick wants to explain how the Slack works a little more.
Can we just send a message on this little feedback form saying, please add me to the Slack channel? And okay, that'll work.
Yep.
That'll work.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. And depending on how busy the chosen ones who actually get those messages are, that can happen in 10 minutes.
Thanks.
Yeah, I get those emails, so I can I can add you pretty quickly.
You might could even specify add me to Todd's trinket course and just take care of both of them with one message.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Todd. That was very insightful. The floor is open for questions. Feel free to unmute your microphone or type out a question in the chat. And I should disclose, when I asked Todd to give this presentation, I did not say it was contingent on sharing one of my exercises. I was very glad to see that.
Yep.
Todd, I had a question. If I'm correct, you basically like took a lot of the materials that were already there and kind of imported it essentially into Trinket, right?
Yep.
Would there be, I guess, like maybe for future submissions, so I know it'd be a lot of work to kind of go back in older submissions. Could you like encourage submitters to like, if they had it ready in Trinket or to include that as part of their submission? Because it does make it easier to kind of just work with it live as opposed to like to kind of like download and such.
Yes, it really does. And recently, I think about a year and a half ago or so, Aaron Titus kind of poked the people on Trinket to make it so that it was very easy to copy courses. It used to be a bit of a hassle to do that, and now it's very easy to add someone as a collaborator so they can copy it into their own accounts. And so that's definitely something I would like to encourage. Yeah, just haven't done yet. But yeah, I think there's definitely an interest in that. Are there other questions?
So Todd, you talked about these are the exercises you like to just go on and play around with to see, what you can make them do. How, just in general, how easy do you find it is to go on, get an exercise set that somebody else has written and learn how somebody else's material or how somebody else's code works? What's the learning curve like there?
At this stage, it doesn't take me very long to do it. Part of that is because I've been doing this long enough that it's pretty straightforward, but I don't think it's too hard because you got the working solutions. That's really the key, because part of our audience is people that have been doing this for a long time and just want new ideas, but it's also for people that have just never done this before and want to dive right in. And if you don't know a whole lot about coding, you don't know the ins and outs and whatnot, but the fact that you've got the solution there that you can then just plunk down into your programming platform of choice and run it, and it works, and you can see the solution, I think makes that learning curve very shallow. And then it's just, you can tweak the parameters and see what happens. And then I think the next biggest jump in understanding comes the first time you actually show it to the students and have them work through the template, because then you realize all the things that can break the code that you didn't know about. But yeah, you should be up and running in no time.
I'd like to make a comment and add a question to this esteemed audience, a $10,000 question that I'm sure everyone has had to face. So we've just barely put our toes into programming in introductory calc-based physics here at UNC. I feel like we're way behind the curve. And our basic experience was the following. We have a huge spectrum of students in the class, everything from computer science majors who think, well, this is kind of boring, to students who not only don't understand coding, but are terrified to try to type a single letter in and make something start. I really like this because, especially since you've got something visual and something coded right next to it, it's just going to work. However, so I think that there's just a rich environment to use. So I think it's great. However, I still would like to get people's comments about how do you deal with this spectrum in your classrooms that I'm sure everyone here has had to deal with. Can you share any anecdotes, what strategies you thought were better or worse? What do you tell them in order to either make them not so bored on the one hand or not so terrified on the other? Any comments at all?
So from experience, the first rule is you're not teaching them to program. Don't ever phrase it as teaching them to program. What you're teaching them is how to use a computer model. One thing that I've done is sometimes I'll actually take the solution and to the exercise and actually give it to the students. And then the activity is them just tweaking the parameters. And that's kind of a nice way, especially at the very beginning of the semester, the very first time they're seeing this. One of the problems we run into is that on our second semester E&M, we have two populations that are coming in. One is coming in from University Physics 1, where they've seen a lot of this. The other is the engineers that are coming from statics to dynamics, where they have almost no coding background. And so merging those two populations is very challenging. Another thought, and this was surprising to me, according to the computer science folks, apparently when you are forming groups for working on these activities, they recommend pairs, whereas I think as physicists, we're kind of inundated in doing groups of 3 or 4. The other thing that they recommend is that you pair students of like skill. Whereas again, as physicists, we want to, have all the different levels, but they're according to the CS education experts, they say like skills. And so those are a couple of tricks that I've come across and have had some success with. Other people have some thoughts?
I know for me with virtual learning, I gave students some options because I do Excel actually mainly with mine. I'm exploring using VPython in my physics 2 class, but my physics 1 class, I'm right now doing Excel. But if I have computer programmers, I say, hey, you can use Python if you want, or you can use whichever programming language you're comfortable with, because I have familiarity with those types of codes. And they tend to like that. I've had a couple students submit labs with Python work, but that of course was when I was all virtual. It's harder to do when we're actually in lab because students want to be as consistent as possible. So I think it depends on that environment.
I'll chime in that just on the group size issue. We just recently switched, we switched buildings. And so we switched rooms, which meant we switched group sizes from 4 students in a group to 3 students in a group. And just that 4 to 3 transition has been really good for the coding bits. Coding is one of those things that you just have to start typing. And so actually forcing more students to be the ones sitting at the computer and, typing, or I do a fair bit with spreadsheets as well, and be the one actually sitting at the spreadsheet. It really does help. The other thing that I'll note in kind of a different direction with coding is that I have found it is very helpful to show students working code several times before I actually expect them to modify or write code, because so much of it is just when they, when you show a student a piece of code, it's got all these different colors, and if you use an IDE, there's like 3 different windows up, and they just get overwhelmed. They don't know what they're looking at. And so if you can show them working code where all you say is, okay, click that button right there, and voila, it makes a plot, and that's what you wanted. If you can do that a couple of times, it reduces the nervousness with the programming environment for those that are really brand new to the subject.
If I can kind of jump off of what Nick had said there, I actually will live code in class. I want the students doing their homework using this. I just froze. Okay.
We can hear you fine.
Okay. I allow students to use coding on quizzes and exams. I've found that you can embed a Trinket code box inside of a quiz that can pop up inside of a lockdown browser. And so students can have their computer open and they can have that window open with the Python code while they're writing out their exams by hand, but they have access to all of the functionality of Trinket. And so that allowing them to use it on quizzes and exams and encouraging them to use it on homework, showing them how much easier it is to do a vector problem in code. Have them calculate, this is what I love to do. I have them calculate the electric field due to 3-point charges. And the thing is, if you do that by hand, it's a slog. But then I get up in front of the class and I type in the code and copy, paste, add them all together, boom, you're done. And they're kind of like, and so you get a lot of converts. One other thing I would point out is celebrate the student's success. I actually just had a student this morning who was telling me, I'm just horrible at this modeling. And I just kind of looked at the student and I said, what are you doing right now? It's like, oh, I'm fixing an error in my code. And I'm like, at the beginning of the semester, you told me that you knew nothing about this. Okay, so don't tell me that you are bad at this. You are learning. You are doing a good job. Celebrating that success is, I think, critical, because all they see is the hurdles. They don't recognize how much they've overcome to get there.
Yeah, I would echo the notion, give them working code to start with. They don't need to start by coding from scratch. They don't even need to end the semester coding from scratch, because very rarely does any of us start with a blank notebook. We almost always start with something somebody gave them. I find it's useful to have them watch some kind of video about the code beforehand, because then that cuts down the class time of me having to explain how it works if they've watched a video about it beforehand. Also, when you do it over video, they can kind of follow along, they can pause, they can check on the code, they can try running it themselves before class if they want to. And when I do that, when they have some familiarity with the code beforehand, they start to dream up applications about, oh, well, can you do this with this code, or can you model this, or can you add in this for us? And when they start asking those questions, that becomes the assignment for me. Is, okay, I don't care what I was going to do with this. I want you to go and make the application that you're interested in. I know a lot of folks will do programming activities during their lab session, not during their class, because the students need that extra time to make mistakes and feel unhurried and not, oh dear, I've only got 10 minutes of class time left. What I do when I'm starting, especially coding with VPython, is that my first programming activity has no physics in it and no math. It's all a creative exploration. And I tell them, I want you to go make a 3D something, and you tell me what it is and how you had to make it. And they have to figure out what the spheres and the boxes and the cylinders are. And next, I mean, I've got them making, snowmans and SpongeBobs and things in 3D, and they have to tell me how they changed all the variables. Todd's definitely right. You want to celebrate the successes, but I also celebrate the errors. If somebody makes an error that I've never seen before, I am impressed. Or I say, wow, what did you do to do this? I really want to see. And then I find out, oh, you just added a space between the function name and the parentheses. It's simple. Everybody makes that. And so I celebrate the errors just as much. And definitely just keep trying, because eventually, after enough weeks of the students trying, it does pay off. Like usually it takes my students about 3 or 4 weeks to get comfortable, but by about that 1 month mark into the semester, they're usually pretty comfortable, and I can say, okay, I want you to go move the position vector. I don't have to remind them where the position vector is or how you change a vector's components.
Great, thanks everybody for that. Yeah, our experience, like I said, we just barely dipped our foot into the water, and yeah, like I said, we had a variety of different student skill sets, but the good news is that we asked everyone to write a very, very short reflection or comment about what they thought about the exercise. And it was uniformly positive, even from the computer science students who said they were bored, said, this is really cool. You should definitely do this more often in the course. So I've already had thought of several of the things that have been mentioned here, but it's nice to get that reinforcement. And I think that now I'm not going to have any free time over break, because I have all these ideas to get this ready for the next semester. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for making my life very busy over Christmas break.
And as much as we want to celebrate the students' failures, I think we also need to celebrate our own failures in trying to implement this. The first time I tried to do this, it failed miserably, and my department basically said, yeah, we're not teaching them to program. But I found that just by persisting and trying again and again and again, sooner or later the stars will align and things will fall into place. So, you're going to fail at this. That's okay. One other thing I would mention, I have actually cut out a number of labs in place of putting in some computational modeling activities, in large part because there were a lot of make work labs in there. We did the pith ball lab, the charged pith balls. And it's like, do I really need to spend an entire lab period on this when I could spend a lab period, having them plot the electric field of a point charge and start to visualize these fields as real things. So I'm okay cutting out some labs and replacing them with modeling. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
That's a great point. In fact, that's how we were targeting things ourselves. We have labs that work really well, other labs that are like, yeah, they're just not that good because we don't have the right equipment or whatever. And we've said, hey, let's the heck with that lab. It didn't work all that well. It's not that exciting. Let's just ditch it and replace it with something of the same subject matter, but in programming. And I think that we're going to search for more opportunities to do that as well.
My trick is I do one lab a semester. Like I'll just say, okay, I'm just going to change this one lab and make that change and just take it semester by semester. At least for me, but I'm also a one-person show at my school, so the only physics instructor. So there's a lot to do.
It's easy to underestimate how much effort goes into creating a successful modeling activity. And I think what you said, just do one a semester, make changes, do whatever. Don't try to make a whole semester's worth of activities all at one time. The other thing is, good instructors borrow, great instructors steal. Don't be afraid to take what somebody else has done, even if it's not the way you want it, even if it's not the way you ultimately think it should be. Just go ahead, slap it in your course and try it, because it's so much work to troubleshoot these things. Let someone else do the heavy lifting and then just kind of slowly increment. As long as you do a little bit better the next time, I think that's a success.
And I find when you, like Todd said, when you slap in what somebody else wrote, it kind of creates a little bit of distance between you and the activity, so that when students struggle with it or they say it doesn't make sense, you say, I don't know what Michelle was talking about when she wrote this one. They're like, well, I didn't write this. I got this off of a website and I'm going to change it next semester. And it kind of diffuses some of the tension in the classroom, where you're kind of open about, yeah, I struggle with this too, and I'm going to do it better. And thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, I actually literally, that was me this semester with Todd's lab. I stole one of Todd's trinket labs, and
They told you how stupid it was?
no, I didn't tell him that. This is like, this is my first time seeing this. I don't know, but I'm trying it out because everybody was like, I want a Python lab. I want a Python lab. It's like, okay, I've been wanting to experiment. I'm just going to throw this and give it to you.
Careful what you wish for.
That does bring up a cultural question. Why is Python so popular, either in PICUP specifically or in physics education? Is it just kind of happenstance, or is there some reason it kind of rises to the top in terms of a lot of us, it seems to be what a lot of us use?
There is a large overlap between the Matter and Interactions crowd and the PICUP crowd. In fact, at AAPT, we usually have our get-togethers together because there is so much overlap. And Bruce Sherwood and Ruth Chabet, that wrote the Matter and Interactions textbook, were some of the initial authors of VPython. It was written for the textbook. So I think that's what it is. Also, Python is just so easy to read and so easy to program in. I know a lot of computer scientists don't consider it a programming language. They say it's basically pseudocode. And I'm okay with that because it's...
my modern students last year, I asked them about that because they had to take an intro programming course where they learn JavaScript, and then they come into mine and I said, oh, well, Python's easier than JavaScript. It's because it's simpler that they had a hard time with it, because they were like, well, where are my braces and where are my extra lines? And I said, no, you just type it like it sounds in your head. And they couldn't wrap their minds around it's going to be that simple.
Gloria had asked about if you make tweaks to an exercise set, how to handle that. There is a button for variants, so you can go ahead and create a variant of an activity. So if you use somebody's as an inspiration and build off of that, create a new variant, and it'll go through the peer review process and everything. Yeah,
I think also my take is that, and I'm certainly not a historian of this in any measure. My feeling is that, at least in physics, outside of Python, but just Python in general, that the astrophysics community had a lot to do with this, because I don't know whether they might have been one of the first groups to more adopt Python or not, but every time I turn around, I see references to code that came out of, or image processing or whatever, that came out of astrophysics. And interestingly, at UNC, which the computer science department here is one of the 800-pound gorillas on campus, they have traditionally focused on C, Java, stuff like that to teach their students. And very recently, in like the last year or so, they've sort of, it looks like they're throwing the towel in. They are switching over to Python. So they've implemented a new curriculum in computer science, a different way to get your degree. And along with that, they've revamped some of their courses. And when I talk to the computer science students now, they're saying, yeah, they got us learning Python now. Do you know anything about that? Right. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really interesting that they seem to be jumping on that bandwagon. And I think, at least in my very small locality, that seems to be new, but very, very critical, and might be a good measure of what's coming, in the future.
So I talked to a data scientist. He was giving a talk to a physics group that I was in, and I was asking what coding language he recommended, and he's like, I would actually just stick with Python, because everything just circles back to Python. Yeah, okay, R, but then Python, and then this other thing, and then it goes back to Python, and so it just keeps on. They're like, you're golden if you know Python. If you know R, hey, that's even better, but it's still like that's the kind of the go-to language, even with data science and stuff.
It's a really good point. As far as I can tell, everything going on in AI, neural networks and stuff like that, is dominated by Python. And they're the ones that have all of the attention right now. So I think it's just gonna snowball.
Well,
So
and go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I was just going to chime in on the astrophysics side of things. Astrophysics had this thing called IDL, which, if you've ever coded in IDL, I apologize. But IDL was the syntax and structure is very similar to Python. It's very sort of free form, bring in some libraries that do the heavy lifting kind of stuff. And IDL is proprietary, and so it's quite expensive. And so when Python came on the scene and was similar, a lot of astronomers jumped over very quickly. I'll also just add that the data science and astrophysics maybe sort of pushed Python. Depending on your campus, if you got pushed from engineering, you likely ended up on MATLAB instead of Python. And MATLAB is wonderful. It's also expensive, and then you either have to deal with Octave or you have to have a site license. So, but again, MATLAB is very similar to Python in that you just import a library and it does the heavy lifting for you.
Another thing I'll add, Python is your gateway into Jupyter notebooks, which pedagogically, it's hard to top the usefulness of Jupyter in terms of presenting a unified environment for your documentation, your derivation, your math work, your importing experimental data, you're graphing the experimental data and the model and running the code, et cetera. Like, it's kind of hard to top that in terms of, I want to hand my students a programming assignment and have them work within it. All right, we have circled around about a dozen topics now. The floor is definitely still open for questions, however late Todd is willing to stay with us. We are past the 9 o'clock mark, so if that's the type of time constraint you are worried about, I do want to remind you of that, but I'm happy to leave the Zoom open for however long folks want to chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go, but thanks everyone for this great conversation. Todd, I sent you I sent a message on the Slack already, so we'll look for that. Anyway, bye everybody. Thanks
see
a
you
lot.
later.
again.
Great to see you again, Stefan.
Yeah, you too, Brittany. Talk to you soon, maybe.
Okay.
Oh, looks like everyone's calling it a night too. That's
Todd, I
fine.
actually would love to have access to the site too.
Okay.
I always like to have access to any trinket site that you make. I'm a stealer. I was giving a talk the other day of is the tilt exercise. I don't know, task, just a way to format how you write your procedure, which is something that we might want to look into with our write-ups. There's this whole movement with equity to have a what is, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank, but objectives or the reasons why to do this, and then the tasks like simplified, like the overarching tasks that they need to do, and then go through the procedure. Because what they're finding is a lot of students who are first coming into college, they might not have had the best high school experience or then good school structures that kind of told them how to do things. Does that make sense? So giving them like a task list, okay, you need to meet with your group and talk about this, and then you need to do this kind of operation in simplified terms. So when they get to the procedure, they have a better idea of how to process it. So I don't know if that's something we should explore or if that's not something to explore. It's called tilting. But yeah, I was showing them as like I was telling them I was stealing stuff from other people. So I'm a stealer.
That's a good way to go. Yeah, I think the CS education folks talk a lot about the scaffolding and how you scaffold the different aspects of it. One of the things my wife and I teach this the intro E&M course during the summer, and she kind of pointed out that there's a lot of background information that's missing from the activities, where just sitting and thinking about the physics and thinking about how to what the sketch should look like and everything. And so she kind of put together these thinking and sharing sheets that the students, I have them fill out before they even start the computer activity, before they even open the code. And it just kind of slows them down. I think there's a lot of room for scaffolding that we could do much better at.
Yeah.
Brittany, you can probably hit stop on the record at this point, I'm guessing. If you're asking a question, you're muted.
I was just thinking that actually. I was like, oh, I should contact Brian. All right, I'm stopping.